I want to start with something uncomfortable, because real growth never begins with comfort. For many years, I believed loyalty meant staying with the same people no matter what. I thought if I changed my circle, I was betraying my past. I stayed in conversations that felt safe, familiar, and small. At that time, I didn't realize those conversations were quietly shaping my future. When I was young, people around me talked about what was realistic. They said things like, "Jack, be careful," or "This is not for people like us. They didn't mean harm. They cared about me." But every sentence lowered my expectations just a little bit more. Slowly, without noticing, I started borrowing their limits as my own. That is how your circle works. It trains your standards without asking permission. I failed many times in my life. I was rejected from jobs, rejected by schools, rejected again and again. But what hurt me more than rejection was hearing familiar voices tell me, "See, this is why you should stop." Those words sound logical, they sound loving. But they plant fear deep inside you. And fear is very patient. It waits years to destroy your courage. Here is the truth I learned the hard way. Before you change your income, your circle has already decided what you believe is possible. Not with orders, but with tone. Not with force, but with repetition. You begin to think small dreams are maturity and big dreams are childish. That is dangerous. Failure is a stepping stone, but only if you walk with people who see it that way. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, but discipline dies in the wrong environment. The world only remembers doers, not talkers. And if everyone around you is only talking, you will stay exactly where you are. This truth hurt my pride, but it saved my life. You think you choose freely. Many people tell me, "Jack, I think for myself." I used to say the same thing. I believe my decisions were independent, logical, and fully mine. But later in life, I realized something uncomfortable. Most of our thoughts are borrowed. We borrow them from the people we eat with, complain with, and spend our time with every day. When I was struggling, I worked very hard. I failed interviews, failed exams, failed businesses. On the surface, it looked like effort was the problem. But effort was never my weakness. My weakness was the thinking I had accepted as normal. The people around me defined what was risky, what was impossible, and what was too big for someone like us. Without noticing, I carried their fears as if they were my own ideas. Your circle tells you how to interpret failure. One group sees failure and says, "You tried, now stop." Another group sees the same failure and asks, "What did you learn?" That difference decides everything. Failure is only painful when it is misunderstood. When you are surrounded by the wrong voices, every setback feels like proof you are not enough. Shame replaces curiosity, and curiosity is where growth begins. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, but preparation starts in the mind. If your environment trains your mind to avoid discomfort, you will miss opportunity even when it is right in front of you. I noticed that when I changed who I listened to, my inner voice changed too. Suddenly, rejection felt temporary. Obstacles felt negotiable. My confidence did not come from success. It came from new thinking. You are not as free as you think if every opinion around you becomes your reality. Change the voices, and you change the questions you ask yourself. Change the questions, and your future changes quietly. This is why your circle decides your wealth long before money ever arrives. Comfort is the real enemy. Let me tell you something that took me many years to understand. Most people who hold you back are not evil. They don't sabotage you directly. They don't tell you to quit. Instead, they comfort you, and comfort is far more dangerous than criticism. When I talked about big ideas in my early days, people smiled politely. They laughed a little and said, "Jack, be realistic." They said, "It's good to dream, but life is hard." They believed they were protecting me from disappointment, but what they were really doing was protecting themselves from discomfort. My ambition made them uncomfortable, so they softened it with jokes and warnings. That is how big dreams slowly shrink. Comfort rewards you for fitting in. It tells you that being normal is safe and standing out is risky. When you fail, comfort pats you on the back and says, "At least you tried." That sounds kind, but it quietly closes the door on trying again. Growth does not come from being understood. Growth comes from being challenged. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and comfort burns that bridge without noise. I learned that kindness without challenge is a trap. Real friends don't only make you feel good, they make you better. The wrong circle celebrates weekends and excuses. The right circle respects effort and progress. One makes failure feel embarrassing. The other makes failure useful. The world only remembers doers, not talkers. But talkers are very good at making you comfortable staying exactly where you are. If everyone around you agrees with you, you are probably not growing. If nobody questions your limits, you will never discover them. Comfort feels like safety, but it slowly steals your future. That is why your circle decides your wealth, because comfort decides your courage. Failure has followed me my entire life. I was rejected by schools, rejected by companies, rejected by people who thought I was not good enough. But here is something most people never talk about. Failure itself is not what breaks you. Who you talk to after failure decides whether it becomes a lesson or a wound. In my early years, every rejection felt heavy because of the voices around me. I would fail, and someone would say, maybe this is a sign you should. Stop. They meant well, but those words turned failure into shame. Shame makes you hide. Shame makes you doubt your worth. And once you start hiding, you stop learning. Later, I met people who reacted differently. When I failed, they didn't ask why I wasn't good enough. They asked what I learned. They treated failure like information, not identity. That changed everything. Failure is a stepping stone, but only if you place it on solid ground. The wrong audience turns failure into a permanent label. The right audience turns it into strategy. Most people quit not because they fail, but because they explain their failure to the wrong people. They bring their broken dreams to people who are afraid of their own. Those people listen, nod, and gently convince you to shrink your goals. That is how potential disappears quietly. The world only remembers doers, not talkers, but doers fail more than anyone. The difference is they share their failures with ears that sharpen them, not soften them. If your circle makes you feel stupid for trying, you will stop trying. If your circle helps you adjust and move forward, you will become unstoppable. This is why your circle doesn't just influence your wealth. It trains how you recover, and recovery decides everything. Many people misunderstand what being poor really means. They think it is only about money, about numbers in a bank account. I used to think that way too, but after years of failing, observing, and learning, I realized something deeper. Poverty begins in the mind long before it appears in the wallet. I have met many hardworking people who never move forward. They wake up early, work late, and still stay in the same place for years. Why? Because they fear change more than failure. They protect stability even when that stability is slowly destroying their future. They call risk irresponsible and new ideas dangerous. That way of thinking feels safe, but it keeps you trapped. When you stay in a circle like that, their mindset becomes normal to you. You start to believe struggle is destiny instead of a phase. You confuse being busy with making progress. Complaining becomes a habit, and ambition starts to feel embarrassing. That mindset is contagious. Stay around it long enough, and you won't even realize you've been infected. I had to confront this truth in myself. I was not poor because I lacked effort. I was poor because I accepted poor thinking as wisdom. Once I changed the way I thought about opportunity, risk, and learning, everything shifted. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, but preparation begins with mindset. If your thinking is small, you will miss big chances even when they appear. Wealth follows identity. If you see yourself as someone who avoids risk, you will always choose safety over growth. But when you sit with people who think differently, your standards rise naturally. This is why your circle decides your wealth, because it decides how you think before you ever decide what you do. At some point in life, you must ask yourself a very honest question. Who feels comfortable when you stay exactly the same? This question made me very uneasy when I first asked it, because the answer was not strangers. It was people close to me. When you begin to think differently, something interesting happens. Some people don't celebrate your growth. They feel threatened by it. Your new ideas make their old excuses uncomfortable. So they respond by calling you unrealistic, arrogant, or naive. Not because you are wrong, but because change exposes what they are avoiding. I learned that this is not always betrayal. Often it is fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of questioning their own choices. They need you small so they can feel safe. They need you familiar so they don't have to grow. Understanding this helped me stop being angry and start being decisive. Winners are willing to be misunderstood to grow. That is a hard lesson. Approval feels good, but it is expensive. It costs you your future. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and discipline often looks like saying no to familiar comfort. The world only remembers doers, not talkers, and doers are rarely approved in the beginning. When you choose growth, you don't become better than others. You simply choose not to stay where fear is rewarded. Your circle reveals who benefits from your hesitation. And once you see that clearly, you understand why your environment decides your wealth. Fear feeds some people. Courage feeds your future. Everyone knows the story of Steve Jobs. People like to repeat it because it sounds dramatic. He was fired from the company he created, thrown out of his own dream. Many people use this story to talk about perseverance, but they miss the most important part. Steve Jobs did not go back to the same environment that rejected him. He did not sit with the same people, thinking the same way, waiting for luck to change. After he was fired, he changed his circle. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him, argued with him, and pushed his thinking to a higher level. He worked with people who were obsessed with excellence, not comfort. That environment sharpened his vision. It forced him to grow in ways he never had before. His failure became fuel because it was processed in the right circle. Many people fail and then return to the same friends, the same conversations, the same excuses. They tell the story again and again until failure becomes their identity. Steve Jobs did the opposite. He treated failure as a classroom, not a courtroom. He learned, rebuilt, and returned stronger. That comeback was not luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and his preparation came from a new environment. When he returned to Apple, he returned as a different person, not because time passed, but because his thinking had changed. His circle had changed his standards. That is why his second chapter was greater than his first. The world only remembers doers, not talkers, and doers choose their environment carefully. This story proves one thing very clearly. Failure alone does not make you great. Failure processed in the right circle does. That is why your circle decides your wealth, not your talent, not your background. Your environment decides how high you rise after you fall. One of the most difficult lessons I had to learn was emotional control. In the beginning, every opinion affected me. Every comment stayed in my head. When people doubted me, I doubted myself. That is not strength. That is dependence. If every voice around you controls your emotions, you are not free. You are reacting instead of leading. I learned to listen without absorbing doubt. This does not mean becoming cold or arrogant. It means choosing carefully what you allow to shape your inner world. Emotional discipline is quiet, but it is powerful. Your circle plays a huge role in this. When you surround yourself with people who complain, emotions become heavy. Fear spreads faster than facts. Complaining drains energy faster than failure ever could. But when your circle respects effort and growth, emotions stabilize. You start responding instead of reacting. That is real confidence. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and emotional discipline protects that bridge. The wrong people test your patience daily. The right people test your standards. One weakens you slowly. The other strengthens you without noise. This is why environment matters more than motivation. The world only remembers doers, not talkers. Doers cannot afford emotional chaos. They protect their focus fiercely. Protecting your focus means protecting who speaks into your life. Emotional detachment is not isolation, it is alignment. And alignment is what allows you to move forward when others stay stuck. This is another reason your circle decides your wealth long before success arrives. Upgrade your identity. First, I want you to understand something very important. Before money, recognition, or success arrives, your identity must change. Your habits, your beliefs, and your self-image decide what you can achieve. And your circle plays the role of both teacher and mirror. If you spend time with people who think small, your identity shrinks quietly without you noticing. When I was starting Alibaba, I realized quickly that working hard was not enough. I had to see myself differently before others would see me differently. If you sit with people who complain, excuse, and settle, you start to believe that small thinking is acceptable. If you sit with builders, innovators, and doers, your standards rise naturally. The same actions feel different when your identity is different. Wealth follows identity because your decisions are filtered through it. Someone who believes they cannot take risks will never invest in opportunity. Someone who believes they deserve growth will seek it relentlessly. Your environment reinforces who you believe you are allowed to become. That is why choosing your circle is more important than chasing money blindly. I learned to upgrade myself by surrounding myself with people who challenge me constantly. I read their habits, their energy, and even their frustrations carefully. I absorb their standards, not their excuses. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and identity is the foundation of that bridge. Without upgrading who you are, every step forward feels harder than it should. The world only remembers doers, not talkers, and doers understand that identity decides opportunity, mindset decides persistence, and circle decides identity. Change your circle, and you will change what you believe is possible. Change what you believe is possible, and your wealth follows quietly, almost inevitably. There were seasons in my life when walking alone felt more painful than staying surrounded by familiar faces. But I learned something critical. Sometimes loneliness is the price of growth, and regret is the price of comfort. Not everyone can come with you on your journey, and that is not cruelty. It is reality. Your future cannot be negotiated by your past relationships. I have watched friends and colleagues stay in the same place year after year because leaving their comfort circle felt too hard. They exchanged ambition for approval, potential for companionship. I chose differently. I walked paths where few followed. I endured criticism, doubt, and misunderstanding. But every step away from comfort brought clarity, confidence, and freedom. It is not easy to detach from people you care about, but your circle influences more than just your thoughts. It shapes your results, your habits, and your belief in possibility. Every moment you spend in the wrong environment is a moment your wealth, potential, and dreams are quietly being limited. Success requires the courage to be misunderstood and the willingness to endure temporary isolation for permanent growth. Remember this: your circle didn't just influence your wealth, it decided it. Loneliness is temporary. Regret lasts a lifetime. When you embrace solitude in pursuit of improvement, you gain the ability to rise above fear, doubt, and distraction. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment, and sometimes walking alone is the only way to cross it. Do not wait for permission or companionship to pursue your potential. Choose growth over comfort. Choose alignment over approval. And when others cannot follow, let them stay behind. Your destiny is too valuable to be held hostage by the familiar. Wealth, freedom, and purpose are decided long before action. They are decided by the circle you choose to walk with.